welcome back to Liz Sews. And today's video is the next installment in my series on drafting your own panties. In the last video, we took your measurements and drafted a very basic high-waisted full coverage panty block. If you guys have not seen that video, I'll link it up there in the cards and be sure to check it out. Today's video is going to build upon that knowledge. We're going to take our basic panty block and change up the style lines so that we really get the look that you're looking for. If you haven't done your panty block, that's okay. As long as you have a basic pattern that you like and fits you well, you're certainly able to use many of these techniques. Some basic patterns that I think are a good starting point would be the cloth habit Watson brief, which is included with the Watson bra. Also, I find that a free pattern you can get is the Megan Nielsen's Acacia panty. That's also going to be a very simple, basic bikini style underwear. So a lot of the information I am providing today can also be used on those basic panty patterns. Now, before we get started in changing up the style lines and look of the pattern, I would recommend that you make up a toile or a muslin of your panty block just to make sure that it fits you exactly the way you want it to. I know that we used your measurements in order to make that pattern, so it should get you fairly close, but just like in garment sewing, there's always a little tweaks here and there that you might need to make. Once you have the panty block fitting you exactly how you want, it's so easy to just change these style lines to get a different look. Now, in editing, I did find that this video was incredibly long, so I have broken it up into two individual videos. Today, we're going to look at the types of fabrics that are appropriate for underwear, and then focus more on moving the style lines around on the underwear. And then in Wednesday's video, I'll go into more detail on incorporating lace into your panties. I frequently use lace in my bras, and so if I can incorporate the lace from my bra into my panty, it gives me a great way to coordinate things without being too matchy-matchy. So now that we know what we're getting into, let's get started. So first up, I thought we would take a look at the different types of fabrics that we can use for underwear. So one of the easiest to work with and probably the easiest to find is going to be a cotton jersey. So here I have a printed cotton jersey. I actually think this came in a Beware mystery box, but you know, cotton jersey seems to be pretty easy to find at most fabric stores, and it works really, really well. You can get some that is 100% cotton jersey, or it can have just a little bit of elastin in there. It doesn't really matter, but what you really want to look for is something that has some stretch to it. And I also really like to use cotton jersey for my interior gusset piece, so what's going to rest against my skin, because you really, for that particular piece of the underwear, you want something that's not going to be holding on to moisture and is going to let you breathe down there and just make things nice and more sanitary. So definitely cotton jersey for the gusset, but it also works really great as the exterior fabric. And then this is another fabric. I think this might be a wool jersey, a wool blended jersey that I have. So I made a t-shirt out of it, and then I went back and made some matching underwear, so that works really well too. So don't think it has to be just cotton. And then I also have here a modal or a bamboo jersey. These are really nice. These are a little bit slinkier to work with, so it's a little bit more of an advanced material than say like a cotton, where the cotton feels very sturdy and stable. This one does have is a lot smoother and thinner feel, a little bit more stretch and recovery, but still makes for very nice, comfortable underwear. Next up here, I have just a spandex. This one came from Joann's, I want to say, and this one has a little bit of stretch in one direction and a lot of stretch the other direction, so just like a nice lightweight spandex works well, or any sort of weight spandex. Next one is one that I really like, and this one is stretch satin. Now the big thing with stretch satin is you have stretch in one direction and no stretch in the other direction, or very little stretch. So when you're working with stretch satin, you want to make sure that your direction of greatest stretch is going around your body, so like around your waist, around your hips and stuff like that, because you want it to stretch right there. And it's not as important that you have stretch lengthwise up and down your body. So stretch satin. Now I also have here some swimwear fabric. This is great to use. I have used this panty pattern to make swimwear bottoms and stuff like that. So swimwear is great to use. And whenever I do make swimwear though, I always line it with swimwear lining just in case, because when this gets wet, you might see a little bit come through it, right? It's really lightweight fabric, so there is a possibility of seeing through when this is wet, so I would always use swimwear lining. And then I have some power mesh. So this is what we use on bras, typically on the back band of a bra, but it works to make some underwear as well. This particular pink one came from Bra Builders because they dye everything to match, but Bra Builders also has some other Pantie materials as well if you don't want to use power net. And then this is micro mesh, so this is a much lighter weight. Sometimes it's called power net. It can be a little deceiving because you don't know which one you're actually getting. The biggest way to tell is by looking at your grams per square meter. But micro mesh is a lot lighter weight. You can see it's a lot more see-through. Let's see if I can get a close-up on it. Yeah, you can see it's a little bit finer. Now, you can use this to make the entire underwear. So I have an example here where I've used a dotted micro mesh to make the entire set of underwear right here. Again, with a cotton interior gusset lining. So you can use it for the whole thing. But what I really like to use micro mesh for is, more often than not, I use it on the back of underwear. So here you see I've got a cotton jersey front, and then I've made the back into micro mesh, and I kind of like it. I think it's a little scandalous, right? Because you get to see some crack, but you also still feel like you have full coverage while being scandalous. So I quite frequently will use a micro mesh in the back and a different fashion fabric in the front. And then the last sort of fabric I have to show you is, of course, stretch lace. So I use stretch lace all the time in my bra sewing. So this is a great way to make a matching pair of underpants, is by using the same stretch lace in the underpants. So the big takeaway when it comes to looking at the different fabrics for making panties is that you want something that has stretch in it. Now, that's not to say that you can't make a non-stretch fabric into a panty. I just wouldn't recommend it for this particular style of panty. There is one exception where I'm going to show you how to alter the pattern just a little bit, and I will put a small non-stretch panel into it. But for the most part, what you want to be looking for with panties is a stretch fabric, and pretty much anything you find will work. Okay, so the first alteration I'm going to show you has to do with the waist height. So as you remember, we drafted our block to come up to our natural waist, but most people don't like wearing their panties all the way up that high, and it's really, really easy to sort of bring that down. And so you can see here that this black pair is a swim bottom, and this one I've kept at the natural waist. So this next pair over here, also a swim bottom, but I've brought it down by about 2 inches. And then this last pair over here, as a pair of underwear, I brought it down an additional maybe 2 or 3 inches more to get more of a bikini style. So if you lay these on top of each other, it becomes really clear that like all of this bottom section remains the same regardless of the height. All we've done is just take out some of the height from the pattern itself. So here we have a block. I've copied this over. I always like to make my changes on not my block. I want to keep my block pristine, and any changes I make or different patterns I want to copy over to a second piece. So I've copied over everything on the block, and I don't have any seam allowances or anything on here just yet. So if I wanted to take this from a full natural waist style, I want to bring it down maybe to a hipster style. Most people, that's about 2 inches of difference. So all you would need to do is measure down about 2 inches from the waist. There. And so you wouldn't be using any of these upper pieces anymore. You would stop right there, and that would get you a hipster style. So about minus 2 inches. And if you wanted to go for a bikini style, again, that's probably about 4 inches down from the natural waist for most people. On mine, I think I took out maybe 6, just because I have a really long distance between my waist and my hips. But for most people, I would say 4 inches down. So I know I've already taken 2 for the hipster, so I'm just going to take another 2 off right here. and that would be a line for a bikini style. So you can see that just by changing the height of the waist, you get those changes. And the reason that we like to draft to the full natural waist up here is that we know the distance from the waist to the hip. It's really easy to measure. And you can tell that when you're looking at, like, say this bikini style, you're actually getting a larger circumference than you are up here at the natural waist. And just like your body is going to get a little bit wider as it moves down your hips. So we like to have that waist as a good cardinal point for us to know where we're drafting down from. So if you can do this, it doesn't have to be 2 inches or 4 inches or whatever. It can be as far down as you want to make it. And that is a really easy, fast way to get a couple of different looks all from this same pattern. So if you were doing the bikini, right, you would only use this portion here and this portion here for the bikini style, right? You would cut off all of this excess, you don't need it anymore. And then once you decide that that's the style you want to go for, then I would of course add in all of your seam allowances. So you're going to want to add 1/4 inch on the sides where you're folding fabric to fabric, or sorry, sewing fabric to fabric. Now for all of the things that I'm showing here today, I'm not going to be using the gusset piece at all because the gusset never really changes. That stays sort of stable throughout all of the different styles. So most of the changes are going to be coming just from these panty pieces themselves. So that would be your pattern that you want to use, and then of course adding on any seam allowances along the leg holes and the waist for whatever elastic you want. So that's the first basic way of changing up the styles to get a variance of different heights of where it's going to fall on your stomach. So the next style I want to look at is doing a high cut, so something that has a little less coverage up here on the legs. I am a super big fan of this like 80s high cut panty, and I'll pop in a little picture here. But my problem with that type is that if I cut my leg hole up higher here, I have to make sure that the side seam of my back is the same length as the side seam of my front. So if I cut into the leg up here, it means that I also have to cut into my back at the same height, and that means removing a ton of coverage from the back, which I don't think is particularly flattering, especially if I was going to make something like a bathing suit. So what we're going to do instead is actually cut the leg hole up higher just in the front, and we're going to leave the side seam about the same length. Now on me, I could probably stand to bring this side seam up maybe 1 inch, but I certainly wouldn't bring it up any more than that. So remember when we were putting in the leg holes originally, we talked about the rule of thirds, and that we wanted to look at about 1/3 of the way in on here. So if I draw in where my hip line is, right, there's where my hip line is. Once again, the 1/3 of the way in is about right here on the hip line. It doesn't need to be exact, but just sort of eyeball it. So this is what we want to make as our highest point. So let's say we want to bring the leg hole up maybe to 2.5 inches, right? Because the way that this is currently sitting, it's going to follow like the break of your leg, and you just might want a little bit more leg to show. Makes your legs look a little bit longer, a little bit sexier. It's definitely a look that I really prefer. So I've gone 1/3 of the way in from the hip, and then I've gone up, I'd say I want to do, I think this is 2 inches. And then you just sort of sketch it in there, and you want to come all the way up and then bend back down. And you kind of want to come back down at a straight line because you don't really want to remove much of your coverage from this pubic bone area. You want to make sure that you're still staying covered here. You just want to get it a little bit more scandalous up on the hip. So that is a French cut leg. So then you no longer would use any of this. This is going to be your new leg style. You haven't changed the side seam length at all, so it should still match up, and you still get a little bit more leg shown here. Now there's no reason why you can't combine this French cut or high cut leg with the waist coming down. So you might want a high cut leg like this, and then you might decide that you also like a lower waist, so a bikini style, so you could bring your waist down 4 inches. And then this becomes your pattern piece right here. Once you've decided what you want your pattern piece to be, then of course you want to add in all of your seam allowances. So you're going to want a 1/4 of an inch where it is shared, where it's going to be sewn in the fabric. And then whatever seam allowance you need for elastic up here. Now on the back, you don't really need to make any changes at all. So if you already have like the bikini style back, see, so this bikini style back that we worked out last time, as long as this distance is the same as this distance, you can still use it with this high cut front. So you may have a couple versions of your front that are going to go along with this back. So you can have a high cut front, you can have a low cut front. Matter of fact, if you wanted to, you can always bring this down a little further. So say you want something that looks a little bit more like boy shorts, you can decide to extend this line a little further. And that means the fabric is going to come down much lower onto your leg. So if I've extended this further down by about 1 inch, that means you're also going to need to add 1 inch to the end of your back piece as well. But you can see how you can vary the length or the cut of the leg to get a lot of different looks. You have more of a boy short look, just your standard brief look with this line, or a high cut brief with this line. Okay, so the next sort of style change I'm going to show you is moving the side seam more towards the center front. So why would you like to do that? So in this panty example that I have here, I've used a non-stretch lace in the center here. And if you remember from the beginning of the video, I said that you really needed to use stretch fabrics, but there was like one exception of where I could figure out how to use a non-stretch, and this is how I would do it. So because I've moved that side seam, instead of it being directly on the side of my hips, I've moved it more towards the front. I'm able to use a non-stretch panel just in this tummy area, and then I use a super stretchy fabric everywhere else. And that's the look I get. I also want to say with this one, I've not just done one thing. So we've moved the side seam more towards the front, which I'm going to show you how to do. I've also used a high cut leg, so I've come up a lot higher. You can see this is where the hip would be, and I've extended much above that hip by about 1.5 inches. And I've also brought the waistline down by about 4 inches. So this is a bikini with high cut leg and moving the side seam to the front. So all of these different techniques I'm showing you, you don't have to use just one or the other. You can definitely mix and match them to get exactly the look that you're going for. So here is, this is one of Madeline's patterns, and I cannot remember which simplicity it comes in. But again, it's a high-waisted underwear, and you can see how she's got these style lines where they've moved. She maintains the sideline, but you could just move this sideline over to here completely and then have this whole side panel be one piece of fabric. So you have a center front panel, a side panel, and then hers actually has, you could have another panel in the back like this. And all of that has to do with moving where these style lines fall in. So let's look at how we move that side seam more towards the front to get a look like this. Okay, so again, starting off with my block, and remember my block has no seam allowances added to it. So the first thing that I'm going to want to do is copy over the back piece just the way it is. Once you have your back piece traced, now you need to sort of move your pattern piece underneath it. And what you want to do is line up the side line of your front piece with the side line of your back piece. And because we don't have any seam allowances currently on here, that means we can just butt them up. We don't have to worry about overlapping them at all. They should just be butted up. And then I'm going to, once I have those lined up, I'm going to continue drawing in my front panel. And what you should have is something that looks like this. Then all you need to do is decide where you want your new front panel, where you want to move this side seam. So in my case, I kind of liked the idea of it being angled. I don't know why, but I like it to be narrower at the top and then spread out to be a little bit bigger at the bottom. So you can see in this one, it's a very slight angle, but it is coming in just a little bit. So I'm going to say that I'm going to draw my new side panel right there. So if you were to do that, you then need to just cut these two pieces apart. So this is one piece and this is one piece. Okay, so here we can see what the two pieces would end up looking like. So in our example, this would be the super stretchy micro mesh, and then this would be what I would use for my lace. Now, when I was choosing how wide to make the panel for this lace, I decided that I wanted to be able to have 3 drops of this floral motif. So I measured how long that was going to be to get the amount that I wanted, and then I divided it in half. And that's how wide I made my waist piece on my upper edge. So now that you have those two pieces, then of course the next step is always going to be add a seam allowance. We'll need to add 1/4 inch here. So obviously you need to tape on some paper. So I would add a little piece of paper like that. And then just like we've done all along, I'm going to add 1/4 inch, because this is going to be a fabric to fabric connection. And 1/4 inch here. So that's how you would go about moving that side seam over to anywhere on the front panel. You can also do this method to move a side seam to the back panel as well. So let's say you also wanted to have a triangular back panel. You could draw another line wherever you wanted that to be. And just like we did for the front, you would need to add the seam allowances both here and here. But in this case, you would have a center front panel, a center back panel, and then just a side panel. Now, I would not recommend having non-stretch in both of these. I would only recommend putting non-stretch fabric in that center front, like tummy panel, just because that area of your body doesn't need to be stretched as much, but you do quite often, you're going to be stretching across your back, especially when you're sitting down. These are actually the Cindy from Ululu. This is their briefs, but you can see here that how I've got a center panel in the front, again with that sort of nice diagonal line, and then she also has a center panel in the back. And she does 2 side panels, but this method I'm showing you would give you that same look. So I would do like this one in a nice sheer fabric, might look really nice, and then opaque fabric for the front and back panels. And you can see how it would be really easy to recreate this look using this technique. Okay, so this next technique I'm going to show you is sort of like the closest that I could think of getting to like a seamless look. So in this case, I've just sewn up a sample here really quick. It doesn't have elastics in it, but I just wanted to be able to show you what this was going to look like. I've actually eliminated both of my side seams completely, and what I've done is moved it to one center back seam. And I chose to sew this up in a striped fabric because I really wanted to show you guys what it looks like to have that nice chevron in the back. So in the front, the lines are going straight across, but then once it comes to the back, you get this really nice chevron look, and it has a really nice effect. And again, I've shown this in the high-waisted version, but you could always combine the center back seam with any height of the waist and any height of the legs that you wanted to put in. So in order to make that center back seam, we're going to start out the same way that we did for moving the side seams to the front. So you want to copy your back piece off of your block and then butt up your front piece next to it and copy that as well. So you have one big piece here. And then that's all you have to do. So of course, before this back panel was cut on the fold, this is no longer going to be cut on the fold. What you're going to do is add seam allowance to your back panel. And this seam is now eliminated, right? This is all going to be one piece of fabric. And we're still going to cut our front on the fold here. Now, the one thing that is nice to note about this is generally when we're sewing, we want the degree of greatest stretch, as I said, to go around your body. And typically that is going to be perpendicular to your fold line. So when we had these as two separate pieces, you would expect that the degree of greatest stretch to go this way on your back piece and this way on your front piece. But because this is now going to be one complete piece, we don't use this degree anymore. And our line of greatest stretch is going to go all the way across like this, which is going to be at a 90-degree angle to your fold. And that's what's creating those really nice chevron stripes in the back. So we don't pay attention to this. We don't pay attention to this anymore. All we needed to do is copy the back and the front, smoosh together, and then add a seam line to the back. And that is how you create that sort of seamless look with just a center seam in the back. That concludes today's video on changing up the style lines of your panty block. Come back on Wednesday and we'll get into a little bit more detail on the usage of lace in panties. See you next time.